What do you do when the CEO knows that they have violated equal employment opportunity, equal pay, and civil rights regulations at the corporate, branch, and employee level, but they do nothing to diffuse a hostile working environment or protect employees that are harmed, harassed, and bullied? You must sound the alarm, expose them, demand investigations and accountability from regulatory organizations, corporate peers, investors, and the media. Hi, I'm Gina Pryor, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. I served over 36 years in the Air Force, and never in my years of service was I continually exposed to and treated with hatred like I experienced at Morgan Stanley. Not because I'm a disabled veteran, not because I'm female, and not because I couldn't do my job. It was because of the color of my skin. I am Black. As a military commander, it was my responsibility to set the standards for my team, to represent the core values of the Air Force, and to protect everyone that served under my command. If individuals did not comply with the standards, laws, and regulations, it was my responsibility to ensure there were repercussions and consequences. Mr. James Gorman has been the CEO at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management since 2010 and in management since 2006. One of the core values is commit to diversity and inclusion, which means to value individuals and cultural differences as a defining strength. If Morgan Stanley adhered to the core values, why did the former global head of diversity, who served for 16 years, file a lawsuit alleging deep-rooted and systemic racial biases against employees of color, and specifically within the financial advisory training program? Mr. Gorman said, quote, "I acknowledge the progress in this area has been slow for us, and we can and should do better." And later, before Congress, he said, quote, "We value individuals and their problems that we have as far as making sure that we treat individuals in accordance with regulations," unquote. The problem is not with the individuals. The problem is with Morgan Stanley, their leadership, and their policies. What has Mr. Gorman done for the past 13 years in his role as CEO and the past 16 years in management? He and his lawyers have changed policies, not racial practices. In my research, I found decades of a malignant and cancerous culture of racism, unequal pay, and sexual discrimination documented in lawsuits that were settled out of court. So rather than change the culture, he changed the process. Individuals that are discriminated against can no longer sue Morgan Stanley. Instead, they must go to arbitration and mediation. One advisor in an open letter wrote, quote, "During a training session in New York City, we were told that Morgan Stanley hires the biggest and most aggressive law firms to fight lawsuits. The message is clear. Do not think about suing Morgan Stanley because we always win," unquote. The numbers don't lie. The head of the legal team is the highest paid corporate lawyer in America. He and his team are paid to keep cases out of the court, the media, regulators, and public accountability. The company has failed to address significant disparities in compensation and promotions for African American employees. The statistics show that about 1% of 18,000 tenured Morgan Stanley financial advisors is Black, and Black trainees suffer attrition rates of nearly 80%. From the beginning of my employment at Morgan Stanley, I experienced racial slurs, disrespect, and innuendos from other advisors and branch managers on a regular basis. One of my branch managers told me, quote, "My presence in the company would bring the organization down," unquote. He said, "You people don't know how to manage money." I was called lazy. I was accused of trying to steal clients from white male advisors. When asked if I could advertise on Black Christian radio, I was denied because he declared, "Those are not the kind of people we want at Morgan Stanley." Older and young white male financial advisors told me, quote, they would never work or team with me because I would not be accepted in the homes, country clubs, or locker rooms of Morgan Stanley and clients. In other words, it's okay for a Black person to be their housekeeper, their cook, their driver, or perform other labor for them, but not be a financial advisor. The repeated discrimination, segregation, and disdain for my presence, not because of my abilities, but because of the color of my skin, created a hostile working environment. My experience is not isolated. It's documented across Morgan Stanley offices throughout the United States. In January, Mr. Gorman will step down as the CEO, and Mr. Edward Pick will become the new CEO. Will he too continue this legacy of cultural racism, meaning it is ingrained in the Morgan Stanley culture and its core values are whitewashed to create a public image that does not exist? I'm sharing my story because I want accountability and compliance at Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley's racist practices need to come from out of the shadows.